The desert wind howled through the canyon like a mourning mother. Blood stained the dust beneath a dying sun. And there, on her knees, was Aiyana, wrists bound, hair tangled with grit and grief. She did not cry, even as the men shouted witch and savage. She looked at the horizon as though it still promised freedom. The rope around her wrists bit deep, but she refused to bow her head. She was the daughter of fire and rain, of women who once sang to the mountains. Tonight, she would meet death on her feet, even if they forced her to kneel. Aiyana had been caught stealing water from a ranch well. The town's fear of Apaches was enough to make her crime a hanging matter. At dusk, the sheriff dragged her into the center of Silverbend, a small cluster of saloons, horses, and suspicion. The air smelled of whiskey and dust, and every porch carried a face eager for spectacle. Someone spat near her feet. A child threw a pebble that struck her shoulder. She said nothing. That's when Colter Hayes stepped out from the shadows. Dusty hat, sun-worn face, eyes like rain over stone. He'd come for feed and nails, but stopped when he saw her, bound and silent beneath their hate. Something in her stillness broke him open, like a forgotten prayer, something long buried beneath the weight of his own loneliness. He had once believed kindness was wasted in this land. But seeing her, bruised and still proud, he remembered what mercy felt like. Sheriff McCrae raised his hand, declaring her sentence. For theft and trespass, 3 lashes, then the road. Colter's voice cut through the murmurs like a sharp wind through smoke. She won't survive that. Laughter rippled from the crowd. Someone called out, "You planning to marry her, Hayes?" Colter's jaw tightened. "If it'll keep her alive." The sheriff froze. The crowd hushed. Dust drifted in the low sun as even the horses stilled. McCrae studied him, seeing not defiance but conviction, something steadier than pride. Colter walked to the sheriff's desk, signed his name to her pardon, and exchanged it for the right to take her from the town. To them, it was entertainment. The lonely cowboy takes an Apache bride. A cruel joke carried on the wind. To her, it was a death postponed. When he lifted her from the dirt, she flinched as though his kindness were another weapon. He didn't speak as he untied the ropes around her wrists. She rubbed them raw and stared at him, unsure whether to hate him or thank him. The journey to his ranch was long and wordless. The land stretched endless. Red rock, dry creek beds, a hawk circling high. The sky turned bruised with dusk, and the air cooled as shadows swallowed the trail. Colter rode ahead, reins loose, while Aiyana sat behind him, still tied, trembling each time the wind brushed her skin. They didn't look at each other. Not once. By nightfall, the shape of his ranch appeared, a lonely cabin ringed by fences and silence. The only sound was the low rumble of the horses and the soft creak of the saddle leather that he dismounted, cut her ropes, and pointed toward the basin. "There's water. Clean. Take your time." She stared at him, wary, unsure if it was a trick. He left her be, went to the fire pit, and lit a flame with practiced ease. The smell of beans soon filled the night. Hunger gnawed her resolve. She crept closer, silent as smoke, and accepted the tin bowl he offered. She ate with her hands, eyes never meeting his, neither spoke. Yet in the stillness, something fragile took root. The fire cracked between them, and for the first time in years, both of them felt less alone. Days passed. The town's gossip ran faster than the river in spring. Hayes married an Apache. He's gone mad. She'll slit his throat before the snow comes. Colter ignored them. He'd lived through worse whispers, especially after his wife, Clara, had run off with a ranch hand 2 winters ago, leaving him with nothing but an empty house and the echo of her laughter. He had learned that silence could be a companion if you let it. He saw Aiyana stitching an old blanket one evening, quiet and focused. Her scars glowed faintly in lamplight, like pale roads across bronze skin. The rhythm of her needle steadied the room. He watched her for a while, the way her breath deepened when she worked, the gentleness in her motions. He asked, "Careful. You had someone once?" She didn't lift her eyes, just nodded once. "He sold me to the soldiers for a horse." The words were ash. The silence that followed carried both their griefs. The man who'd lost love to betrayal, and the woman who'd lost herself to cruelty. Neither spoke again that night. He began leaving small things near her place. A shawl, an apple, a new comb. Never handed them to her, just left them by the doorway, as though gifts were better received when wrapped in distance. Each morning, they worked in quiet rhythm, he with the horses, she mending tools, cleaning, cooking when she dared. They found a strange harmony in that silence, like two wounded souls circling warmth without daring to touch it. When he fell ill from a fever, she cooled his forehead with river water. His breath came in ragged gasps, his skin burning. Through half-dreams, he whispered, "You don't owe me." Her reply came softly, steady as the wind, "And yet, I stay." That night, when the fever broke, he dreamed of her standing in the doorway, tall, calm, unafraid. The sheriff rode out one evening, dust cloud trailing behind his horse, demanding she be returned. "Folks don't like the sight of her here, Colter. They say it ain't proper." Colter stepped between them, arms loose but his stance solid as stone. "She's my wife now. You'll ride back alone." McCrae's smirk faltered. "You've lost your damn mind." "Maybe," Colter said, his voice low but unshaken, "but I've found something worth losing it for." The sheriff looked from Colter to Aiyana, who stood behind him, chin high despite her fear, and saw something he couldn't understand. He turned his horse and rode away, the dust swallowing him whole as the sun sank. The horizon burned orange, painting the land in molten light. The wind softened. Aiyana watched from the doorway, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her chest. Tears shone for the first time, not for fear, not for sorrow, but for the unbearable weight of being seen. That night, the air around the cabin felt different, softer somehow. The desert had not changed, but she had. The walls that once felt like a cage now felt like shelter. For the first time since she could remember, she did not dream of running. And though neither of them said the word aloud, both knew something had shifted, something deep and tender, like a seed buried beneath the dust, waiting for the first rain. Aiyana woke to the sound of doves in the rafters. The ranch smelled of rain and earth, the kind of scent that made her believe the world could heal itself after all its burnings. She was learning the rhythm of this life. Coffee boiling, horses snorting, Colter's boots pacing softly outside. The quiet between them had grown comfortable, a kind of language of glances and gestures that said enough. He didn't touch her, didn't demand anything. Sometimes they shared coffee by the porch, watching dust devils dance across the golden fields. One morning, she caught him looking at her, not with hunger or pity, but with a tenderness she'd never known. His eyes softened as though he saw something sacred in her silence. "Aiyana," he said quietly, voice almost lost in the wind, "you make this place feel alive again." She turned away, afraid of wanting too much. The sun climbed over the hills, painting everything in a warmth she didn't yet trust. Her heart, like the land, had been dry too long to remember the taste of rain. When Aiyana ventured into town for supplies, the world turned colder. The chatter stopped when she entered the store, every head lifting to watch. Ellie McCrae's voice, sharp and honeyed, cut through the hush. "So this is the new Mrs. Hayes," she said, smiling like a blade. Laughter rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Savage wife. Poor man's gone mad." Aiyana stood tall, spine straight as the pine she'd grown up beneath, clutching the flour sack like a shield. She refused to bow, then the door creaked open. Colter appeared beside her, buying what she couldn't, coffee, nails, lamp oil. He said nothing to them, only stood close enough that his presence steadied the air. His hand brushed hers, just once, as he paid that it was a small thing, but it silenced the room more than any gunshot could. That night, she sat by the stable, watching rain pool in the dirt. The moonlight painted her tears like silver threads. Colter found her there, crouched low beside a bucket, her hair damp with sorrow. "You don't have to prove nothing to them," he murmured. Her voice cracked when she answered. "I am not ashamed," she said. "Just tired of fighting ghosts." He nodded. "Then stop fighting. Ain't no one left worth that kind of hurt." Her shoulders trembled. He didn't reach for her. He just stayed until she stopped shaking, the silence between them thick as rain. A week later, the sky turned wild. A thunderstorm rolled in from the south, fierce as judgment. Lightning ripped across the horizon, and the wind howled like a wounded thing. The first strike hit the barn roof, and in a breath, the world was aflame. Colter ran through the storm, shouting for the horses. The air was thick with smoke, sparks leaping like devils in the dark. He broke open the stalls, coughing, dragging the frightened animals into the ring. But one was still trapped, a young mare, screaming, her halter tangled. Aiyana didn't think. She followed him in. "Get back!" He yelled, but she was already there, slicing the ropes with his knife, her hair catching embers like starlight. The heat scorched her palms. Smoke clawed her lungs. When they finally staggered out into the downpour, both were shaking, eyes red, soaked to the bone. Colter caught her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing soot from her cheeks. "You could have died in there." "So could you," she whispered. The storm quieted then, the rain falling soft, gentle now that the fire had burned itself out. Their eyes met, two broken hearts reflected in the glimmer of lightning's afterglow. And before either could think, he kissed her. It was not a desperate kiss, nor one of conquest. It was a trembling thing, tasting of rain and smoke and everything they'd survived. When it ended, she rested her forehead against his chest, and for the first time, neither of them felt the world watching. Days passed in fragile peace, until the dust rose again from the east. Sheriff McCrae rode up with two deputies, their faces grim and hungry for trouble. The sheriff held out a folded paper, its edges damp with sweat. "Word is, your Apache bride was seen scouting with her people last night," he said. "You harboring enemies, Hayes?" Colter's voice stayed calm. "She was here. You're lying." McCrae's grin was tight. "Then you won't mind if we search." Aiyana stepped forward, chin lifted. "You'll find nothing." When the sheriff reached for her arm, Colter's hand moved faster. His revolver gleamed in the sun. Silence fell heavy. The deputies froze, their boots shifting nervously in the dust. McCrae looked into Colter's eyes and saw the kind of stillness men don't challenge. One heartbeat. "Two." Then the sheriff lowered his hand. "Keep your savage," he spat, turning his horse. The three riders vanished into the distance, leaving behind only the echo of their cowardice. That night, the fire burned low. Shadows swayed on the cabin walls. Aiyana sat beside him, her hands folded tight in her lap. After a long silence, she spoke. "I have not been honest," she said softly. "I did guide my people near this town once. I was looking for my sister. She was taken years ago. I thought if I led them close enough, I could find her trail." Colter watched her, face unreadable. "I am not clean," she said. "But I am not what they say." He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. His fingers were rough, steady. "Then we're both a little dirty," he said. "That's what makes us real." She breathed out a trembling laugh, half sob, half relief. When he drew her close, she didn't resist. Her head rested against his shoulder, and the firelight painted them in soft gold. Outside, the desert wind carried the scent of sage. The world, for once, seemed to hold its breath. At dawn, the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Riders approached from the ridge, the same men who had captured her once before. Their voices were coarse, echoing off the rocks. They came for vengeance, claiming she'd betrayed their outpost years ago. Colter met them at the gate, rifle steady, jaw tight. "You're not talking her," he said. Bullets tore through silence. Dust exploded. Shouts rang through the morning. Aiyana grabbed the spare rifle, firing beside him, her aim true. The smell of gunpowder and sweat mixed with the scent of fear. Together, they stood their ground, side by side, breathless, fierce, alive. When the last echo faded, smoke hung low over the ranch. One of the attackers lay dying in the dirt, eyes glassy, whispering with his last breath, "She's one of them." Colter lowered his gun, gaze unflinching. "She's one of us." The dying man closed his eyes. Silence settled. The desert, vast and endless, seemed to bow before them. Weeks passed. The ranch grew quiet again. The barn was rebuilt. Wildflowers began to grow where the blood had fallen, bright and stubborn in the morning sun. Aiyana wore no chains now, only a small silver band on her hand, the metal dull but sure. Sometimes, the townsfolk came by. Their tones softened, their eyes uncertain. They saw her tending the horses, humming softly beside the man who'd chosen her, and they said nothing. The gossip faded, replaced by the uneasy respect born of things unspoken, in the hush of evening. When the pines whispered and the sky turned lavender, Colter would lean back on the porch rail, coffee in hand. "Guess we both found peace where no one thought we would," he'd say. Aiyana would smile faintly, eyes reflecting the fading sun. Peace, she'd whisper. Found us. And sometimes, when the moon climbed high, they would stand together in the quiet field, the same field where fear had once lived, and breathe as though learning how to start again. Maybe love ain't the grand thing folks make it out to be. Maybe it's just two weary souls deciding not to give up on land, on life, on each other. The desert still remembers their names, the cowboy who refused to hate, and the woman who taught silence to bloom. And if you listen close, when the wind crosses Silver Bend, you can still hear it. Not a cry, not a prayer, but a promise kept by two hearts that chose mercy over the noise of the world.